everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over how to create this kind of honeycomb pattern. But the main thing is we're going to look at is how to do the left and right cross. And this is a great first time if you are wanting to make cables or work with cables with knitting. This is a great way to get started with this because you don't have to use cable needles and it will give you that same effect of cables. And what I've found is this has been probably one of my favorite stitches to work with because it gives nice texture. I've used it in ribbing for collars on sweaters or sleeves, the bottom of sweaters, just to give it a different type of ribbing look. I've also used it with hats, like winter hats. And especially when you're using this fluffy yarn, it just makes a nice texture to your work. And it's not really complicated. So if you know how to knit, if you know how to purl, if you know how to cast on, this is your next step. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm not going to use this yarn that I've got it started right here. I'm not going to use this one. It's just too busy and I feel like it might be kind of hard for you to see it. What I'm going to actually use is just one solid color. And so I chose to use this yarn I got from Hobby Lobby. It's cotton and linen. It's all yellow, so I'm hoping it will come out a little bit more, a little bit more bold so you can see the actual ribbing portion. All right, so the first step that we're going to do is we're going to cast on multiples of 8 plus 7. So I'm going to do my multiples of 8. I'm going to do, I think I'm going to cast on 32 plus 7. That would be what? 32 plus 7 would be 39. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and cast that on. Whatever cast on method that you want to use, go ahead and use it. All right, so the actual yarn calls for size 8 knitting needles, but I'm actually using size 7. So you can actually kind of go up or down depending on what yarn you're using. Not all yarn is labeled, I think, correctly. So you just kind of have to go with what you feel the yarn calls for. This yarn, I feel like you could almost use a size 6 knitting needle. And I'm not actually, yeah, it calls for a size 8 US, but to be honest, I feel like it's more of a size 6. Okay, you guys, I'm actually going to show a little bit of the cast on method that I'm using. This is called the long tail cast on. And the reason why I like this method is because it's so versatile. So that means that you can use it with the magic ring, and it really does help when you're creating 2 sleeves or 2 socks or whatever together, in combination. So this is why I really like the long tail cast on. I also am going to show you, if you're a beginner knitter, this is what I really like to do, is to, whenever you're starting casting on, and it really just depends on how tight you make your yarn when you do cast on. But what I've noticed is beginner knitters sometimes make the cast on so very, very tight. So what is something that I've started using is placing both knitting needles together as you cast on. So I'm going to go ahead and do the long tail cast on. And once you get your hands to, memorizing it, you'll be able to do it without even thinking. But definitely, if your cast-ons, if you've noticed the first row can be very difficult to work with, place both knitting needles together and then cast on, and then you can do it as tight as you want. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to cast on, remember, multiples of 8. So 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to do another set of 8. 1, and then it's 8 plus 7. And so here's the cast on. Whoop, loop, and pull. Okay, if you want a slower version of the long tail cast on, go ahead and look at my tutorial. I did a short little video on how to do the long tail cast on, but that's all you have to do. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and continue to do my cast ons. I think I'm gonna do 16 plus 7. Remember, that's gonna be our multiples of 8 plus 7 on the end. All right, meet back up whenever you get your multiples of 8 plus 7 casted on. Okay, all right, I have done 8 and an 8, 16 plus the 7, so that's 23. So I've got 23 casted on. Now, it is super tight because, like I said, I'm showing you how to do this method. Now, once you're ready to start your first row, pull the second knitting needle out, and now each one is loose enough so that you can easily do that first row. And it does feel a little bit looser than what I would normally do, but it's just mainly to kind of make it so that it's not so difficult for new beginners at knitting. Okay, so sometimes, like I said, beginners make it so tight, it's so difficult for them to even do the first stitch. That's what I've noticed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and follow this pattern. The very first row, so row 1, should be purl, knit, so purl and then knit, and then the repeat part is purl 3, knit 1, and you're going to repeat that till the end, and then on your last stitch you'll purl it. Okay, so I'm going to purl. So I'm going to purl the first stitch. So to purl the first stitch, you want your yarn in front, and you're going to place your hook through the front part of your yarn, and you're going to loop it over, and then you're going to pop it off the needle, and you've just purled your first stitch. The next stitch is going to be a knit stitch. So you're going to place your yarn back in the front of your work. You're going to place your you're going to place your needle through like this, making an X. So if you see, that's what you're doing. And then you're going to loop over and pull through. If you are having problems or just learning how to knit and purl, I would go back. I would just practice knitting and purling. Okay. All right. So knit, so purl and then knit. That's your first 2 stitches. And now this is the repeat. You're going to purl 3, knit 1, and repeat till you get to the last one. So I'm going to purl 3. I've got my yarn in front. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to knit 1. Remember, that's my repeat. So I'm going to purl 3. 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a knit. Oop, I don't want to knit I don't want to purl 2 together. Now I'm going to purl 3, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to knit. All right, I'm going to purl 3, 1, 2, 3. Remember, I'm going to knit. And now I'm going to purl 3, and then I'm going to knit, and then I'll have 1 left on my needle, on my left-hand needle, and that would last 1 I'm going to purl. And then I'm done with round 1. Oop. Knit. And then purl that last stitch. All right. So that's kind of setting the stage for our stitch pattern. So that's our row 1. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this time to talk about what we have. So I've turned my work. This is considered the right side row, and now we're turning our work, and now we're on the wrong side. We will never make changes to the wrong side. It will just be more of a foundation row where we are kind of putting that pattern in place, locking it in place. That's how I kind of consider whenever I'm doing the wrong side. and it locks our pattern in place. Whatever we are doing, it kind of makes it a little bit more bolder so we can see what's going on. So if you look very closely, you've got purl knits, purl knits, purl knits. The wrong side row is actually the reverse of the right side row. So if you turn it back over on the right side, all of the purls and the knit stitches kind of reverse. So in this row, all we're doing is we're purling the purls and knitting the knits. So you can try and follow the pattern, but if you don't understand it, you will make mistakes. And I feel like the best thing to do is understand what your wrong side row is. Purl the purls, knit the knits. So I'm going to go through. A knit stitch makes a V, a purl stitch makes a little bump. And so I'm going to go through, I'm going to knit, purl, and then I'm going to knit 3, purl 1. And if you think about it, that's the reverse of our last row. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and purl the purls and knit the knits. So there's my purl. I'm going to purl it. There's 3 knit stitches, so I'm going to knit 3 times. And if you are looking at like knitting needles, maybe purchasing a set, I would suggest possibly if you're able to, purchase a few and that that you're going to work with, like sizes that you're going to work with, try them out before you buy a set of knitting needles. Because to be honest, I've never bought a set of just knitting needles. I've always purchased a few that I've liked, and I do have some of the same needles that I use constantly, the same sizes. With knitting, the problem with knitting versus crochet, so if you're a crocheter, like when you get to a project and you want to stop working with that project for a little while, you can pull that hook out of your project and work and use that hook. But with knitting, you have to leave that project because it's constantly live until you cast off. So what I've found is you need a lot more knitting needles than you do crochet hooks. So I've bought a set of crochet hooks that I use, but it's really easy for me to use like the size L. I can use the size L crochet hook on all of my live projects, but versus knitting, like this is live. If I put this down, I can't just pull this off my needle and use the needle for something else, unless I want to put it on like put it on scrap yarn, but it's one more step that I'm gonna have to do. So a lot of times I'll just leave it on the hook or on the needle, and I'll pick up, this, I might need these same size. So I have multiples of the same size just due to that. All right, so we are on row 3, and this is the right side row. So in this row, we are going to be doing the same repeat patterns, but before we do that, we are going to this row is kind of like, this is going to be our row where we're going to actually cable move that knit stitch around that we casted on. So there is one knit stitch here, here, and here. So every third stitch is our knit stitch. So that's what's occurring. And we start off in the very first one, we start off with the first stitch right there. So we're going to do something called the right and left cross. So we're not using cable needles, okay? I want to make sure that you understand this. If you see a tutorial on cable needles where they're doing left and right cross, you really don't have to pull them onto a cable. So let's go ahead and get started. So this first knit stitch after my purl, so I've got a purl here, I'm actually going to move it over, so it's actually going to be the third stitch. And how you do the move, this is called a left cross. So I'm trying to move that stitch to the left. So this knit stitch, I'm trying to move it to the left. Okay, so this is how you do the left cross. So I'm going to go ahead and purl the first stitch. And remember, I'm moving the knit stitch to the left, one space. Okay, so what I'm going to do is these two next stitches I'm working with together. And so how I do that is I'm going to knit through the back loop of this purl stitch. So I'm going to turn my work over. I'm going to place the knitting needle, my right hand knitting needle, through the back loop of my second stitch. I'm going to knit and pull the yarn through, but I'm not going to pop it off my needle because I have another live stitch in front of it. So I'm going to loop it around and I'm going to place my stitch through normal like knitting, but it feels very tight. So just try and pull it a little bit, but not too much. And I'm going to knit like normal. Okay, so I'm going to loop it around. Oops. All right, I got to start over. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start over because I lost that one. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and repeat that part. I'm going to loop through and pull through the back loop, and now I'm going to go through the first stitch. I'm going to knit it, and it is tight. Okay, I'm going to put my yarn. I'm going to put my yarn through right here, and now I have 2 stitches that need to come off the needle. Okay, I'm going to pop them both off, and now you can see this is now purl, purl, and now I've moved that knit stitch to the 3rd stitch. Okay, I'm moving it inward. All right, now the next stitch I'm going to purl it, and then I'm going to come to a spot where I want to do the right cross, bringing it closer. So I'm transferring this stitch. So here's the next one. I just purled the middle one. I want to move this knit to the location right here. Okay, so this one's super fun. You're going to actually stick your needle through that stitch, the second one, as if you're going to knit it, and you're going to knit that stitch. Boop. And that's going to be staying on the needle. And now I'm going to knit the first stitch without taking anything off the needle. Going to knit it like normal, and now both of those can come off the needle, and you'll see I have now moved this knit stitch to one space over to the right. And so I've moved both of my stitches, I moved them over. So let's go ahead and I'm going to purl the next stitch, and let's do this again, and then I'm going to purl the next one until I get to one stitch before my knit stitch. So here's one space before my knit stitch. I have a purl. Now I want to take this and move it in. So I'm going to purl one more time because I'm moving this stitch inward on itself, just like I did over here. And you can actually see it now. This stitch is now moved in. And I'm not losing any stitches along the way. It's all going to stay the same. All right, so now here's my knit stitch. Here's a purl stitch. I want this knit stitch to be moved over here, so I kind of want to switch these two. Okay, and I'm moving it to the left. So to move to the left, I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to knit through the back loop of the second stitch. And then I'm going to knit through the front of the first stitch. And now I've just slid that stitch over. So now I've kind of switched places with it. All right, I'm going to purl the next stitch. And now on this stitch, I want to bring this stitch in. So I want to move it to the right. So I'm going to switch these two. There's my knit stitch. There's my purl stitch. I want to move this stitch here. So I want to switch these two. So to do that, to do a right cross, I'm going to knit the second stitch. Try not to split my yarn. And then I'm going to knit my first stitch. And now I'm going to pop them both off my needle, and then I've just moved this stitch over. I've switched the two stitches. Okay, so we're doing a great job. We're going to keep going. We have two more to do, just like the left and right cross. So I'm going to purl till I get to my next knit stitch. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to scoop my work over. And now there's my knit stitch. There's that V shape. I'm going to switch these two. I'm making a left cross. So I'm going to turn my work underneath. I'm going to knit through the back loop. And then I'm going to knit like normal through that first stitch. Okay, and now I've just switched those stitches. I've moved this stitch to the left, and I'm going to purl one. And then I'm going to do another right cross. So there's my knit stitch, there's my purl stitch. The right cross, you just knit the second stitch, then you knit the first stitch without popping it off the needle. Okay. Boop. And then I'm going to purl that last stitch. And I've just finished my very first right and left cross where I'm moving the honeycomb look together. I'm moving all those pieces together so it makes a nice little texture, shape, whatever you want to call it. So there we go. Okay, and now I'm going to turn my work. Remember, the wrong side row, I want to knit the knits and purl the purls. You can try and follow the pattern if you want, but if you don't, like I said, if you don't understand what you're doing, you'll make mistakes. Or that's what I've seen. So this portion right here is a knit. I'm going to knit that one. I'm going to go ahead and knit the next stitch, and then I'm going to purl the stitch right here. It's kind of hard to see. Flip your work over. That's my knit stitch. So the third one's my knit stitch on the right side. So that means it's a purl on the wrong side. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to knit the knits and purl the purls. Be mindful of when you get to an intersection where the stitches have changed. Remember your cable portions. So you should really only be you should only be purling a total of 6 stitches. That's it. Oop, I think I should have purled that one. Yep. So whenever you get to a change where you change them up, it does get a little bit tricky to see which one you purl and which one you knit. So that's what's taking me a second. This one is actually a knit stitch. So if you pull it down, you'll be able to see it. It's a knit stitch. Flip it over, you can see it's purl. So that means I know I'm going to knit on the wrong side. So the next stitch will be my purl stitch. That one's another knit. Yep. So the next one's a purl. Knit one. Okay, so turn your work. Once you're done with that row, turn your work to the right side, and you'll be able to start to you'll start to see the shape form of our little honeycombs. All right, so I've brought them together, and now I've built them up. The next stitch would be where you're taking the stitches and you're moving them away from each other. So you'll be doing the reverse. So I'm going to take this stitch and I'm going to move it to the right. So with the right cross, we're going to knit the second stitch like normal and then the first stitch, and it will kind of move that stitch over. So let's do one more row, and then I'm going to go ahead and stop the video because it is taking a little bit longer to do these stitches, and I don't want to go above a certain amount of time. All right, so I'm going to purl the first stitch, and then I want to move my stitch over, that knit stitch over, so to the right. So I'm going to knit the second stitch like normal. So this is how you do the right cross. And knit the first stitch, and then pop them both off my needle, and now I've moved that stitch over to the right. I'm going to purl, and to do the left cross, so moving this stitch right here to the left, I'm going to move my yarn over. I'm going to knit through the back loop, and then I'm going to knit this first stitch through the front loop, and then I'm going to pop it off my needle. And then I've got the purls, the knit stitches are now transferring from, they're moving left and right. So they're moving outward. So I'm going to go ahead and purl till I get to one purl stitch before my knit stitch, because remember I want to transfer that over to the right. I'm going to purl one. And then I'm going to knit through the back loop of the second. So now I'm moving it to the left. And knit through the first loop. And then I've just moved it over. All right, I'm going to go ahead and purl until I get to one stitch before my cable. And there it is right there. I'm going to knit through the front of the second stitch and through the front of the first in that order. I'm going to pop them both off the needle. Then I'm going to purl the next stitch. And now I'm going to, this is a left cross, so I'm going to go through the back loop. And I'm going to knit through the front loop. Just like that. And then pop them both off the needle, purl the next stitch. And I've just finished my next row. Okay, the wrong side row. So now we've kind of moved all of our stitches. They're going to go outward. And now I'm going to go to the wrong side row. Remember, you purl the purls and knit the knits. Okay, and you'll continue on in this pattern. So this next stitch, you'll just kind of locking in what you did in place. And you'll start to get this beautiful like honeycomb kind of pattern. You can eliminate maybe one of your stitches. You could cast on multiples of 7 if you wanted to get rid of that middle stitch, and maybe bring these closer together to create that honeycomb shape if you wanted to. And that's how you create this nice cable look without cable needles. Thank you for joining me. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll add more tutorials. I have a few little videos I want to be able to post, kind of sharing how to make amigurumis with crochet, and how to kind of set that up. So that will probably be posted in a couple of days. I'm getting ready to record them. So anyways, I hope you're having a great day, and thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe, like I said, to my channel, and I'll be adding more videos the more subscribers I get. All right.